The shower isn't so bad as compared to the rain, is it? The joke came out a little awkward. He felt embarrassed and he didn't know why. Hello, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing Selene Apoptosis. This game looks like it could be a little graphic, so if there's a bit too much showing, I might blur out a few things or whatnot. So I'll keep it in line with YouTube's TOS and all, so don't worry. But if you want to see the unfiltered or uncensored or anything like that, just comment below and I can get that out some way. But yeah, I hope y'all enjoy this. I hope you're enjoying the demo series. And yeah, give it a like if you enjoy it. Let's hop into Selene. The sound was driving him crazy. Achievement unlocked, writer's block. Okay. Monotonous, muffled thuds were resonating throughout his head with dull pain. The pain wasn't too strong, nothing unbearable, but that sound. More than anything else, he wanted the sound to just stop. Thud. Nevertheless, the knocking sounds didn't end. He knew it well enough because he himself was their origin. Thud. 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 The nose of his slipper was hitting the rear of his desk over and over again, like a huge fluffy moth frantically ramming against the window glass. He wanted plenty of things. He wanted to pay the rent in time this month, not to displease his landlady again. He wanted to finish the script, at least in draft, because a draft is way better than nothing, something one can work with. And he wanted to sleep. No, not quite that. The problem, a serious one, was that he didn't really want to sleep. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his shut eyes, pressing his eyeballs until dancing pale lights appeared. Of course, he took the sleeping pills. When a healthy 8-hour sleep gives way to a not so healthy 5-hour nap, then a 3-hour eyes shut break, and then goes away entirely. You stop thinking how this will impact your liver. You just want to sleep. You need to sleep, especially if you have already taken an advance payment for the first part of a gig, and the goddamn text won't just write itself. However, if the text could in fact write itself somehow, he would probably lose his job. He didn't have any illusions in this regard. As soon as neural networks get smart enough, he and dozens of other ghostwriters will vanish into morning mist of a new era in literature. He didn't have much of a name or connections, only some skill and a knack to meet the deadlines for the most part. The client was content with this, and he was content with the pay, so everything went well until the pills started failing him. Blam. This time, the tic got too strong. His foot jerked and hit the board with a very noticeable pain. Seemed like he even heard his toes crack. He muttered a short curse and rolled the chair away from the desk, although he knew now that his attention was not fixed on the blank text file. The tic should go away all by itself. It's funny how the consciousness is detached from the body. He often thought about it, especially while having insomnia. It's like you're working as a team, but your partner starts pulling something. You seem to have common goals, but when all hell breaks loose, you're suddenly left alone with it, and your partner's more interested in watching the fire than fighting it. In the end, you have no idea what's on his mind. Well, at least there won't be any more knocking. Good. A small window at the far side of the room flashed white for a moment. A storm? Now that he thought about it, the day was hot. The vicious, stagnant air still filled the room. This and the barely audible squeak of an overheated network filter. He became sensitive to such things when he couldn't sleep for a long time, made the entire room seem to vibrate a little, like a cocoon that's about to hatch. Actually, that did sound like a good line. He rolled back to the table and was about to write that thought down, but paused over the keyboard. He remembered the individual words and the general idea, but the sentence had already slipped away. This time, the white light seemed to fill this entire room. Then a thunder followed, resembling a low-gut roar of something large and famished. Good Lord. He called to God way too often for someone who never goes to church. Just a habit he inherited from his mother. A furious patter of raindrops pounded on his window. There's no way he did work like this. Not now. But maybe it's for the best. Since he was a little boy, he slept well during the storms. Had to seize the moment. He groped for a pack. He groped for a packet of sleeping pills. It's nice to have your working tools at hand. Popped the pills into his mouth and opened the window to hear the steady patter of the rain. Then he went to the bed and collapsed on top of the bed sheets, his clothes still on. He could tell by the sound the water had flooded the windowsill and was trickling down to the floor. He decided that was a small price to pay. He felt a pleasant chill of cloth beneath his cheek. The wavering haze was gradually fading from the room, yet the sleep did not come. He tried to take off his shoes, change position, take a pillow, cover himself, throw the pillow away to the other side of the room. Nothing helped. He just lay there with his eyes closed, and though his closed eyelids felt heavy, he knew it was an illusion. All in vain. He's not sleeping. He can't sleep. Thud. At first he thought he was imagining things. Thud. Thud, thud. Sometimes the knocking paused, but it never stopped completely. The sound came from below, from the first floor. Someone was banging insistently on the door, and with each thud he could feel the rage building up like a tight knot of pain around his stomach. He is trying to sleep. Is it really that hard to just leave a man alone? At least at night. At least in the house that he pays for. Specifically so that nobody would bother him? He opened his eyes, easy, just as he thought, sprang to his feet and ran down the stairs. Something was boiling inside of him. Halfway to the door, he took a turn to the cupboard and pulled out an old baseball bat. He wasn't likely to actually use it. He asked himself if he would as he reached for the door handle. No, he certainly wouldn't. But he's angry, and he wants the night guests to learn it. What the hell? The rain was still pouring, or rather it was actually getting stronger, as his mother would say, and the floodgates of heaven tore open. His mother used to say a lot of things. That was on the list of reasons why he had to rent this overpriced house where everyone could start banging the door in the middle of the night. A cat, for example. What the hell? He said it again, this time aloud. A cat was standing on his porch. She looked like a purebred British short hair in all respects, except for the color. Aside from the smoky gray head, it seemed as if she was dropped into a vat of white paint while her lower part was dipped into a black one. Wet fur clung to her small, rather skinny body, dripping with water. The cat could have probably slipped into the house as soon as the door opened, but instead she froze, as if waiting for the host to say something. Do we let her in or do we refuse? We let her in. Raining cats and dogs. It was cold outside, much colder than one might think. He didn't feel angry anymore. Alright, come in. He stepped aside, free in the doorway. The cat didn't move. So you don't want to, huh? He was about to say fine then, close the door, go back to the second floor, and lie in a suffocating half-sleep until morning, but he finally realized what was wrong. The bat. He threw it away, aiming for the sofa, but missed. The bat clattered on the floorboards. The cat followed into the darkness with her round yellow eyes. The sounds didn't frighten her. He sighed. I won't hurt you. Come in if you want. The cat raised her eyes at him. For the first time, he actually saw and couldn't help admiring how big and yellow they were. The cat's pupils were also so large and incredibly round, like two full moons in an eclipse. Just as he was about to close the door for the second time, the cat murmured something and fluttered into the house, butting him with her wet head as she passed by. He smiled. Strictly speaking, at this very moment, his line had ended. If the landlady found out, and he was sure she would, he'd have to look for a new place to live. There are plenty of lonely, bored seniors in the neighborhood, he thought, and they only have two hobbies, observing and reporting. The subject and the recipient aren't that important. Well, it's fine. Maybe he'd leave the suburbs. Maybe he'd move to an apartment since his getting privacy didn't work out anyway. The rain was getting stronger still. He closed the door. The cat explored the house with cautious curiosity, stopping by different objects as if trying to understand their purpose. Watching that was amusing, so amusing he even forgot about the stain. When he remembered, it was already spread out, a dark spot of water in the place where the cat clung to him. He pulled the wet cloth away from his body and stared at it blankly for a moment, then almost groaned aloud. The cat was soaked, so she probably got a lot of dirt in the house. He decided not to turn on the light. He had had enough disappointment for the night. Instead, he went to get a towel. Alright, come here. The cat turned her head to the voice and froze in place. She was examining the TV, a lifeless black mirror of plasma panel and a lacquer frame that he haven't even touched since moving in. In the reflection, the cat herself looked black. She gave him a long, appraising look, and then with a sudden eagerness trotted towards him, deftly avoiding the obstacles. He was surprised. Maybe the cat decided he was more interesting than the TV, or maybe she acted out of respect for her host's will. Anyway, he felt grateful. Finally, someone he could actually negotiate with. Suddenly, he thought how nice it would be to crawl under the blanket with a warm ball of fur. It would surely have helped him to fall asleep. As a child, he had a cat. Gray, huge, brash, immensely ugly, and equally beloved. He often fell asleep hugging him. The cat's name was Timo, and he faded into a June night many years ago. The cat bumped her wet head against him once more. He thought that cats usually shake off the water themselves. Usually, but perhaps not always. Hey, easy there, you're all wet. The cat looked up at him with her moon-shaped eyes and murmured something again. Do something about it, then. He smiled and got to work. He had to squeeze the fur thoroughly so the towel soon turned into a wet rag. Should he? Ooh. We're gonna bathe the cat. That won't do. I'll give you a bath. As he carried her to the bathroom, the cat stayed still in his arms. A warm and incredibly light body pressed against his chest. He was expecting the cat to bring out the claws any moment. Maybe as he opens the door. Now? Or as he turns the light on. Maybe this time? But nothing happened. The cat glanced around the new room, looking at him with her intelligent, almost human-like gaze. Weird. Not a single muscle in her small body moved. She was curious, and that's about it. She trusts me. He was about to ask her if she knows where they were and what was going to happen next, but that was just too much. So, it shouldn't be very difficult. The two of us can manage this. What do you think? He read somewhere a cat should get used to the new surroundings before bathing. Fear is born out of the unknown, and in the regard, people haven't gone too far from cats. New scents, unfamiliar objects, and the splashing of water. These are just shadows under the bed that will fall back if you get a better look at them. He carefully put the cat on the floor. She looked around the room again and returned her questioning eyes to him. It seemed like she'd got comfortable enough. He turned on the water in the shower and felt a gentle touch. The cat was already loitering around his feet. She was curious, indeed. The shower isn't so bad as compared to the rain, is it? The joke came out a little awkward. He felt embarrassed, and he didn't know why. Alright. Well, I guess they're doing the blurring for me, at least. She's just a cat. Maybe it was because of how the water glistened on her skin, or how she was looking at him from under half-lowered lashes. She was actually watching. He met her eyes, and each time felt shame burn through them. But that shame was thick and sweet. He was a little dizzy. His hands slid over her smooth, wet skin, and each time he would ask himself, was it really necessary? Then he would feel her eyes on him, and his thoughts would melt, running down her thighs with the lather disappearing between her neat toes. The bathroom shimmered, molten, bright, pulsating with light or darkness. He felt he was losing his balance and pulled his hand away, but she returned and pressed it to the wet, hot skin, covered in a soapy veil. She guided it. Achievement unlocked, cat person. He couldn't remember. He couldn't remember how he ended up in the living room again. The cat was napping peacefully in his arms. He absently ran his hand down the cat's wet back, tracing the bumps of her spine with his fingers. I should get you some food. Let me see what I have. He got up with just a tad bit of difficulty, nothing he couldn't handle. Still, his body felt unusually heavy and unwieldy. He had to give the cat something to eat. He would lie down afterwards, and then hell, maybe he'll even fall asleep. Maybe he should have gotten a cat from much earlier. A ball of fur with a pair of moon eyes and a velvety voice that you should always negotiate with. And that's about it. That's kind of funny. He could have avoided all that suffering if only he had a cat. The kitchen blurred before his eyes. He got to the refrigerator and opened it, squinting from the light and leaning on the door way harder than he was supposed to. If the landlady was around at the time, she would have told him exactly, so don't lean on the door. After all, this is her house, and her refrigerator, and everything should be neat and tidy in case she has to move new tenants in. Perhaps the landlady would have even warned him about the milk. The milk itself is completely harmless, unless, of course, you are allergic to lactose. What matters is the bottle. Bottles, much like cats, can vary greatly, but this particular one was made of glass. If only the landlady was here, she would probably have told him not to touch the bottle, because he's falling on the floor and the bottle might break, and then the milk would spill, and he would have nothing to feed the nice cat he found. Or rather, it was her who found him, and very timely because he was lying on the floor. He had been lying on the floor there for some time and would have been lying still if he hadn't felt the light touch of something hot and rough on his cheek. It was almost like a dream, although of course comparing sleep with fainting isn't quite correct, no matter how you look at it. The floor beneath him was surprisingly hard, cold, and wet. He felt all those three qualities clearly and was afraid to imagine what would happen if he tried to move. But he had to move, one way or another. At last to see what's up, because something hot and rough was still sliding up his cheek, gradually creeping up to his ear. He felt a warm breath and then a cautious bite. Ouch! He jumped on the spot. A shadow rushed to the side and then calmly began to lap milk from a puddle. This is an interesting story, by far. The cat. What are you doing? The cat looked at him briefly and licked her lips. I think she said no need to be this dramatic. You were lying around idly, and you're not even a cat, see? Actually, I'll probably start reading her part if they're gonna do that. Well, you're right. I let you down. I had to get my punishment. I let myself down too. Good Lord, now there's cleaning to do until the night's advent, like his mother would have said. I'll go get a rag. Stay here and don't ruin what's left of the kitchen while I'm gone. The cat watched him go with a skeptical look. When he returned with the bucket, the cat was gone. The Theater of presents How to Bake. What? What is happening? Okay, thank you. Something exciting is happening. I'm so confused. Where did this? Is this still the same story? Did you take the pills? Scratch out the entrails? The Egyptians widely used honey for embalming and preserving food later than recipes were adopted by the Greeks. Also add a teaspoon of apricot jam, a walnut, and a little cinnamon. Before baking, put a teaspoon of butter on top of. Microwave for 5 to 7 minutes at full power. Don't listen to them. Walnut apple tea. What? The next time he saw her was in a few days or maybe a week. He always had a bad sense of time, especially when he was immersed in his work. He still couldn't sleep, but at least he was making some progress with the script. It was a narrative game project, as the customer called it, but actually meant do whatever you have to finish it on time, else forget about the payment. And so he did, although he was resentful, and that got in the way a lot. The reason of those feelings was the cat. He knew how stupid that was, but he couldn't help it. He forgave her for the bite almost immediately. That wasn't the thing. He was bitter about how the cat ran away, despite him trying his best to take care of her. She was nowhere to be found in the house, so he immediately thought about an open window on the second floor. Maybe she should have closed it. He dwelled on the thought for a while. He even approached the window at some point, but in the end, he decided not to do anything about it. He was hoping, and there was no shame in that, the cat would come back. And she did. He had just settled himself on a sofa with some book. Some was the word, as he couldn't remember a thing from the cover, even though he read the title several times. The symbols were floating before his eyes, and of course he couldn't make out a word. No wonder, considering he didn't sleep at all. When you think about it, it was surprising he could write in this state. Either way, he was barely following the book, and so he wasn't upset at all when a fluffy head butted his head. Hey, I'm trying to read here. He complied. Pat the cat. Achievement unlocked. You were absent for so long. I forgot. I thought you won't be back. There's a big difference between expectations and hopes. He had learned that well. Why did you leave? Did I do something wrong? The cat stayed silent. Alright, it doesn't matter that much. I'm happy to have you back. After all, there was no point in this grudge from the start. Nobody gains anything by holding on to small grudges and staying blind to what they really feel. You wouldn't have won anything. It's not a damn lottery. The cat rubbed against his arm again. He put the book down and gently placed her on his lap. The locket around her neck, unexpectedly cold, touched his skin. Then he got a hunch. Did you go home? Well, someone must be caring about you if they put that collar on. This time it was him who stayed silent. The cat had buried her head in his stomach. Want me to take it off? He nodded, because if you think about it, that really was a reasonable choice. The cat's fur was thick and smooth, very pleasant to the touch. He wanted to bury his face in it and find out what it smelled like. What she smells like. Do you have a name? And what's yours? The cat looked at him carefully with her bright yellow eyes, as if saying, take a guess. But she didn't actually say anything. On her locket there was a small engraving, a crescent moon that was dimly shining in the pale light coming out of the window. Selene. The cat looked up at him and her pupils flickered into two full moons and an eclipse. Then she rubbed against his arm one last time and stood up, stretching and arching her back. I won't. She left, but the name stayed with him, in and around the house. Selene. So hummed the lass, white in the moonlight. So whispered the long shadows of the branches outside the window. What is Selene? For some reason, that question bothered him. He vaguely remembered it had something to do with the mythology. Such things never really caught his interest, but fortunately, he knew someone he could turn to. Oh no. Don't tell me this is another something. Maybe that was just him like driving? The matter of perspective achievement. Hope. Meanie. You know I can't stand them. And you know it's me who have to take care of it after all. You're basically living in the office. Ethan never liked cats, and the dogs too, not much of a difference. He didn't like the very idea of keeping a predator at home, even a small one. He couldn't quite explain why. Hope sighed. She closed a tab with the Catteries website, then slapped her husband lightly on the shoulder. Even so, the faces of the Persian cats, deeply depressed and equally concave, still lingered before his mind's eye. Ethan held up his hands in a conciliatory gesture. He knew it wasn't over yet. Hope is not the one to give in this easy. She never was, and for him there was something incredibly appealing about it. Come to think of it, quite possible it'll be him who capitulates in the end. In a relationship, you always have to sacrifice something. In 4.5 years, or even 5, according to Hope, he had learned this quite well. Suddenly, Hope frowned, looking at the screen. Let me see, I hope I got a new project. The Middle Ages are fine and all, but they are about to start pouring out of my ears. Ethan reached for his laptop, but Hope grabbed it and dodged him. Well, such are the benefits of freelance. Come on, give it back. Hope giggled and leaned over the armrest hanging over the floor. Hope's defenses withstood several more attacks each time Ethan thought the laptop would definitely hit the floor. Then she gave Ethan a peck on the cheek and slid off the couch. The laptop returned to its owner. Yeah, a hilarious one. But there was nothing about the Middle Ages in this letter, not a mention of the payment, too. Ethan read it several times. Leaving the formalities aside, there was but one question in the letter. Ethan, or rather the part of him that was responsible for finding the accurate answers, got immediately engaged by the wording. What is Selene? Ethan rolled that question around in his mouth as if tasting it. At a glance, the answer was simple. Ethan's real passion was the early Renaissance, but he was a history consultant after all. The agency was paying him for a reason. He needed no research to tell that Selene was the goddess of the moon in the ancient Greece. Is that Nox? Or Nix? Tell me below, or tell me in the comments below if I'm right on that one. Nox or Nix? The question, however, seemed to be way more intricate in its nature. Or at least that's what Ethan wanted to think, because the Middle Ages were actually about to start pouring out of his ears. He was always diving into his work completely, and living in an age where madness, curse, and death are contagious and an exhausting trial. He needed some distraction. Of course, he had a part-time job with these online courses, but the platform where he lectured wasn't planning anything new just yet. All in all, the request looked interesting, if not for one small matter, that payment. Or rather, the lack of. Ethan hesitated. The sender's name seemed familiar. He searched the email address and found out they already worked together on a couple of texts. Both times, his efforts were duly paid for by the agency. Ethan never worked for free. It wasn't his principle, but rather a matter of necessity. The problem here was the fact that Ethan loved what he was doing too much, and if you're trying to make money from what you love, that's a slippery slope. A free service there, an unpaid consultation here, and then you go back by splitting the sheet protectors 8 hours a day, watching your dreams rust away. That sounds too real. Besides, Ethan didn't want to let Hope down. Of course, she supported him when he decided to go freelance, but Ethan never wanted to take advantage of that. No, that won't do. He works only under contract and does not give free consultations. Just as he was about to give that, a response Hope's fair head popped from behind the door. On the walk, Hope brought up the cat thing a few more times. Ethan protested absently. His thoughts went back to the letter again and again. To that question. The more he thought about it, the more he wanted to find the answer. It was no longer a matter of helping an acquaintance whose name Ethan immediately forgot. No, it was Ethan himself who needed a little help with distraction and an answer. It was a weird thing to do, but Ethan waited until Hope was fast asleep. Only then did he sneak over to his laptop to write a response. Certainly he had no real answer as of yet. He threw it in a few dozen polite words, the general meaning of which he had taken up the case. Then he clicked send. When Ethan returned to bed, Hope was still breathing slow and deep. He listened to her breath for a while, trying not to think that he had broken his own rule. After all, he really needed a distraction. No matter the strength of your affection, sooner or later you will want to take a break. It was another thing he had learned over the past 4.5 years. If Ethan had to point out when things started to be off, he would say it was on Saturday, and that is about a week after the first letter. But this, of course, wouldn't be accurate. Those weird things started happening almost immediately after he pressed the send button. The first night he saw a room in his dreams.